Call our meeting to order. Finance Committee meeting on the 4th of March, 4 o'clock. I think our town manager is going to show up at some point. Is that correct?
I hope so.
Okay.
But yes, I believe so.
Seeing nobody from the public here, I won't assume there's no public comment other than what we're going to talk about today. So what I'd like to do, we have a meeting today and we have a meeting tomorrow, and we have to get through all of our motions for the warrant. I was asked to defer the conversation on the housing, or at least taking a vote until tomorrow. Tucker wanted to be here. He's not on island. He's coming back today. So I agreed that we would do that. What I'd like to do is, Andrew and Leslie are here to go through the zoning articles. And there were some that were still open and some that had not been, the planning board hadn't voted on. So we'll go through those. And if there are any individual articles that members of the Finance Committee would like to speak about, we can pull them out and talk about them. If not, it would be my preference to vote them all as a block. But I don't want to railroad anybody into a decision you otherwise don't want to make. So, but we'll do that. And then if we get through that during our allotted meeting time, I think we'll start at the beginning and work our way through the articles and see how far we get. And then we'll finish up tomorrow. So with that, well, before you start, Andrew, is that acceptable to members of the committee, or do you want to go in another direction? So
It's fine.
okay, great, thank you. Andrew, thank you for coming. Leslie, thank you for coming.
Thank you, board members. So we were last year, I think, on the 20th, and then our planning board meeting was the 21st, the next day. So I have that we went over all the zoning articles except for 4.
Andrew.
Oh, sorry. This one's a little bit.
Is it being wonky?
All right, I'll hold it. Okay, there we go. So Articles 47, 48, 49, and 57 are the ones on my list that we didn't talk about. And I can go over the others if need be. So 47 is a bylaw change which changes the ground cover ratio in the old historic district. The board voted to give this a unanimous recommendation on the 21st. Changes the ground cover in the ROH district only, not Sconset Old Historic, from 50% to 40%, and that's based on an analysis of the 1,300 parcels showing that the average is actually quite below the 50%, and really that's in line with the historical pattern that's there. So it still gives, the average is somewhere in around 25%, so it still allows for the types of additive massing or additions in the future, but does not get to 50% ground cover, which would be quite massive in that district. So that has a positive recommendation from the board. Hearing is closed. Article 48 was this is regarding the housing needs covenant transfer to a qualified family member. There is a companion article, a home rule petition article. This has been before you for a number of years. The legislation has not moved forward, and our representatives have suggested exploring a local option. In this case, what this proposes is provided there's a deed restriction for one of these transfers, This could move ahead without the legislation. If you remember what this does is it allows you to transfer a property to a family member with the, basically the restriction that a covenant unit or covenant house attaches to that property. So when it is conveyed outside a family member, the covenant then becomes activated. So this has received support all along from you, from town meeting. It's just the legislation has not moved forward. So,
Could you just remind me, when it transfers out, presumably the purchaser is qualified under whatever the percentages are that they elect to come in under. Are they required to maintain that level of income, or is it just a one-time qualification?
with any of the ownership programs, you qualify at the point of purchase. So if your income rises in the future or falls below those levels, that basically continues to the next sale. So it's not monitored on an ongoing basis. It's qualification at the point of sale.
And then at the point of sale, does the value of the sale reset to
At the next
Sale.
at the next sale, the buyer has to meet all those qualifications at that point. So it's always going to correct itself at the point of sale. That's a little bit different from the rental. The rental program, that's an annual, basically, audit that
Adjustment.
happens there.
Okay.
Okay, Article 49.
And that got a positive motion from?
Positive motion, yes. I will say our, Stephen Welch, who's our planning board alternate, was a big proponent of that. So Article 49 is the technical amendments, and this has a positive motion as well. Leslie, could you walk them through this?
Right, so technical amendments, this seems to be an annual occurrence. So the beginning, we're making some modifications to existing definitions, ground cover and yard setback. That's to allow people to apply exterior insulation to the foundation of their house or behind the exterior shingles to increase their energy efficiency. And it would really just have a minimal impact. Tertiary dwelling, we're changing that definition to require a special permit when the tertiary dwelling is the third dwelling unit within a structure. The planning board had a lot of discussion about, the third dwelling unit basically turning the building into a triplex, which may have other implications that aren't really intended. So this would give the planning board some additional review. Small letter B, amending section 7A to change the use allowance for second dwellings in the MMD from yes to no. There's a different section of the zoning bylaw that already prohibits second dwellings in the MMD, so this would just be to line up those two sections. C, amending section 7A to change the use allowance for contractor shop and the CMI from no to special permit. When the CMI district was originally created, it was intended to just be in the Mid-Island and to replace the Mid-Island overlay district. It has since been expanded to areas out closer to the airport where a contractor shop may be a reasonable use. So that is required by special permit, so there would be a butter notification, and the planning board would hold a public hearing. Amending section 12G, that just clarifies that the planning board is the sole special permit granting authority within the MyPod. That's to keep people from having to go back and forth between the planning board and the zoning board for a single application. Just consolidate the permitting. And lowercase e to amend section 13C. That's not adding any new provisions. That is, again, clarifying a discrepancy between two sections of the bylaw. And then number 2, to amend the zoning map. The planning board has been trying to correct situations where a property is split between two zoning districts. And in this case, the majority of the property is in a 1-acre zone, and there's a small strip in a 2-acre zone. So this would consolidate the entire property in the LUG1 zoning district. And the planning board gave this a positive recommendation.
Great. Any questions for Leslie?
We actually have lots that are in one zone and another zone. I thought we pretty much defined zoning lot by lot.
While there are some cases where the zones were delineated based on contour lines, and a lot of that has been corrected. In this case, the property owner bought an abutting strip of land through the yard sale program, and they just wanted to get it all in one district. 57? So Article 57 is basically a technical amendment dealing with the definition of structure. A couple of years ago, we had added an exemption to the bylaw to allow some steps to be located in the setback. It was mainly intended to address in the smaller zoning districts where a house is moved on a lot to, put on a new foundation or to meet floodplain requirements, that sort of thing. And the language was changed on the floor of town meeting. It didn't really meet its intended purpose. And so we're proposing a correction to that. This was a citizen article, but the planning board did give it a positive recommendation. Okay. Those were the final
Those are-
articles.
Okay. Any questions? So just to run down, from 30, beginning at 38, so that if we vote them as a block, we know what we're voting. Everybody's aware, so just tell us whether there was a positive motion or a,
So Article 38 is positive.
okay.
Article 39, positive. Article 40, positive. 41, positive. 42, positive. 43 is positive. 44 is positive. It did have an amendment. No, I guess we fixed that before, didn't we? So it was positive. 45, positive. 46, positive. 47, positive. 48, positive. 49, positive. And that covers all of the planning board sponsored articles. So Article 50 is take no action. Article 51 is positive. 52 is positive. 53 is take no action. 54 is take no action. 55, take no action. 56 is positive. 57 is positive. 58, take no action. 59, positive. 60, take no action. 61 is positive. 62 is positive. Uh, 63 is positive.
Great. Thank you. We have any questions on any of these individual articles? Questions on the planning board's activities? Stephen?
No questions.
Joe?
Sort of a general one, it seems like every meeting we have, those regular and special, when the zoning, especially citizen proposed zoning, there are very often situations where people who own a larger zone piece of land want to have split it or have the zoning reduced. Looking at the ones that you've basically been positive towards virtually all of these, are you expecting that we're going to get neighbors' objection or, I like bigger, I don't want my neighbors to be able to subdivide their lot,
Yeah. Well, the board adopted some new criteria to review all of the map changes. So there's 3 citizen map changes that came through. They applied that new criteria. 2 of them are actually quite minor. I mean, and they're in, one is like an area surrounded by where people have already been changed because of a series of citizen articles. So I don't really expect any issue there. The other one, I don't anticipate a problem. The one on Appleton Road is a property discussed last year, discussed again this year. There's strong feelings on both sides of that. I don't anticipate that moving forward. It did get a negative recommendation, so.
Thanks, Andrew.
I'm sorry, Angie, you said it got a negative recommendation, but, thanks, Stephen. You said take no action. It's not negative.
Well, we just go with the take no action. That's how we voted on it.
Okay.
Is that it?
So, ready for a motion?
I'm ready for a motion.
Okay, so I'll make the motion that the Finance Committee support the recommendation of the Planning Board on all of the aforementioned articles.
Why don't we just, Article 38 through Article 63, is that, those are the articles?
Yes.
Yes, those are the articles.
Okay. Is there a second?
I second it.
Thank you, Cliff.
Sure.
It's okay. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you very much. Leslie, Andrew, thank you for your time. So Ally, 38 through 63 are done, okay? So why don't we go back to the beginning? I'm going to move through some of the ones that I think are pretty much pro forma. And so if I'm rushing again, please stop me. And I think we'll just do each of these individually so there's no mistaking what we're talking about. Starting with Article 1, which is receipt of reports. I guess if I can get somebody to make on these motion and second, and then we'll vote them.
Are you on one?
Article 1,
I want to go through on one.
receipt of reports. Is that a problem?
Good place to start.
We're going to stop, we're not going to vote, we're going to get all the way through 7, and then we'll talk about 8, and then we can continue on, okay? So Article 1, receipt of reports. Is there a motion to
Motion to adopt?
adopt?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Article 2, appropriation for yes,
We need to hold that one until tomorrow because there's
what, the unpaid bills?
one department came send us on
Okay,
please.
of course. Article 3, which is an appropriation for prior year's articles.
To adopt.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Article 4, revolving accounts, spending limits for fiscal year 2020.
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Article 5, which is the reserve fund, it's $500,000. And that's a standard, we've been using that number every year, haven't we?
Motion to adopt?
There's- Any discussion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Article 6, general fund budget transfers. Looks like there are two of them.
Motion to adopt.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Article 7, personnel compensation plans for fiscal year 2020, changing rates on a couple of these categories.
Motion to adopt.
Is there a s-
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Okay, Article 8, which is our general fund budget category. Comments? We're now seeing these. I asked Brian to check on a couple of them as I went through them. Brian, would you just come up and sort of bring us up to speed a little bit on that?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, as was noted, you did call and ask for me to look at a couple of these because the totals here were slightly different than what was actually in the budget presentation from the Saturday meeting, specifically police, DPW, Marine, and Fire were some of the ones that we did look at. And that difference is because in the presentation that we gave to you, it included the total for all the revolving funds and everything that was part of that. So any money that was part of the revolving fund was included in that detailed presentation that we gave to you. That's netted out, so this is the only, what's in Article 8 is what is actually in the raise and appropriate number. And when David called today, we went back and tied them back out to see that. So this number is net of all of the revolving funds, so that's why if anybody else noticed, there might have been some changes to those numbers.
And so, and Brian, the important point here is that you were able to tie these numbers
Yes,
out.
we
so
were able to tie them back out, so.
Great. So any other questions that we have on Article 8?
Motion
for-
to adopt Article 8.
Whatever the number comes to, it's
Second?
discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Article 9, which is the Health and Human Services budget, which we had a presentation on, and you were here, right?
I
for
was
that?
here.
Okay. Do you have any, did you guys go back and change anything?
No, we did not.
Okay.
Motion to adopt. Second.
Well, any discussion?
Yeah, I think just that we need to, revisit this before we get to the same point next year. There's, per our discussion at the last meeting, we've got several issues that are going to come up, I think, before we can approve this next year.
The hospital social services notably.
Yeah,
Right.
that's,
Yes.
that's a strong number one. And there's been issues with, other applicants in the past also, so.
So how do we make sure that's not lost in the discussion?
I mean, one of the changes that we had from last year to this year was that we changed the application, or Rachel Day changed the application to state that they needed to have their 2020 budget, at least in draft form, in the application, which last year we couldn't get for a couple of the organizations. So anything that we want to think about changing, we can work with Rachel to say in the application, your application is considered incomplete if X, Y, and Z doesn't come in. Right, so, and if it's incomplete, then you're not eligible for funds if you don't get it in by the deadline. So there is the carrot and stick approach on that, if we want to try to, if we think of a way to phrase it, or they do get, Rachel does get and distributes the quarterly reports on how things are going. So there is follow-up on it, and I don't know if Libby, you wanted to add anything to it.
What about communicating with the hospital about that issue?
In which way?
It seems just like we should,
Yeah. Yeah, one throat to choke, it's always my favorite approach.
or that we should be proactive in.
That's a good one.
Yeah, that's why I don't like committees, one throat to choke. She sits on FinCom.
I was just going to say that I think something similar a little bit came up last year, and I did talk to Rachel about it, but it sounds like this is a little more deep this year?
Well, I think this year, because of the fact that the hospital has doubled their requests, and so we were at 720-something thousand for, against a $450,000 allocation, which is not guaranteed year over year. So,
If somebody can just give me some bullets, I can send sort of an official email to the health and the contract review committee with a CC to you all and the board, select board, telling them, here's the things we want you to work into your process before fiscal '21.
And I'm not sure so much it's about changing the application or
Right.
about the review process. I think it's, somebody needs to start sooner than later coming up with a way to assess the value of each dollar that's being allocated to the different organizations. There's going to be some triage next year. Some people are going to get a lot less funding than they're expecting, and they've gotten over the last few years. So, which dollars do the most good and where? So maybe along the lines of what, Peter, you guys have done at Capcom, figuring out where the dollars are most needed and best used, that's the kind of work that's going to need to be done here. And it's, very subjective, but at some level, that work needs to be done.
And I think one of the concerns we had about specifically the request from the hospital was there was some sort of comment made that if we didn't fund them fully next year, there might not be that program.
well, or there'd be significant delays in
Right.
response time, because, yes.
And I think we should acknowledge that and maybe ask we need to have some communication about that, or the Service Contract Review Committee does, not necessarily the Finance Committee. But some conversation should happen.
I think what I'd like to do, one of the things that occurs to me is to sit down with Dorothy Hertz, the chairperson, and discuss with her exactly the issue that we're all raising about, if you were the sole person running this, how would you assure that this happens? Because it is very hard as a even small committee to say mental health is more important than children's snacks.
Right.
Right, so, and drug prevention, and. So the trade-off would have to have a pretty clear criteria that's published to the town and to the application, or applicants. So I would suggest, or I would offer that I could sit down with Dorothy after town meeting and just say, let's walk through if we had to do this, and then Dorothy, could you come back and say you endorse it, and you would present it to FinCom as a way of going forward? For review or something, if that makes sense.
I think the sooner that rubric can be put together, the applicants can sort of grade themselves and
Right.
judge for themselves whether they may or may not receive all or close to all of what they've gotten in recent years.
Yeah,
We give the hospital at Fairwinds the two largest amounts of money, so
correct.
I think those are the places that we have to make sure we're communicating with.
Correct.
Isn't part of another slant at this issue, the fact that some of us have expressed concerns that the hospital is sort of changing its tune vis-à-vis providing services or support to various programs, maybe that they support or execute, and town programs, and that, and I don't really know how you do this, but it seems to me like some of the dialogue has to be with the hospital about
Yes.
if they're kind of changing their financial reimbursement perspective on delivering free care or subsidizing services that they support the town on, it would be good that the town knows about it, because that factors into how much money other people are going to get, so.
Right, because it would appear that they're trying to pass some costs off onto us.
Well, it certainly, again, I don't think any of us know, but it certainly seems like they're changing their tune and either jacking up the figures they would like other people to pay, a la the mental health transport article. And I don't know, maybe it's not a trend, maybe it's just anecdotes at this point, but certainly I think a couple of us found this a little suspicious, so.
So can I propose that you sit with Dorothy, and I think sooner rather than later, while it's fresh on it in everybody's mind. And then if there is some actions that would be appropriate for Libby to take, i.e. send a note or bullet points or whatever, so that it has some official support. And it may not be, it may just be Rachel just needs to continue to have conversations with people, but if you would then, if this is okay with you, Libby, if you would then communicate what those are to Libby and let her follow up, does that work for you?
Yeah, maybe, in the end, it's, I said, come back here to FinCom, maybe sometime before the end of the fiscal year, it's in the minutes, and
Yeah.
we can still follow up in writing after, but everybody hears it.
So why don't you see what you hear, and if you think we should
Okay.
do that, then we've got a couple of it looks like we're going to add a meeting a week ahead of town meeting anyway. So perhaps if you
Okay.
do that, then we could put that on the agenda for
Okay.
that.
Let me reach out to Dorothy this week and see where she is. Peter?
A different way of looking at it, and excuse me for using this analogy, it sounds like we're trying to feed a family of 6 chicken salad with the chicken meat off a chicken wing. Now, professionally, for $450,000 of allocation, I think it's more prudent to look at how we can be a cooperative, how we can take some of their guidelines, some of their mission statements, and figure out how many of them overlap, and almost condense, because once again, I want to remind myself, we're only talking about $450,000 worth of allocation, and I would rather give out, this is just me, one group $450,000 and trying to spread it out into whether it be 5, 8, 12, or 15. It really doesn't make sense to me, because I think they're all great causes, but it really would make sense. I think if we were taking our brain power, we wouldn't, excuse me for using the word, waste our time with just this amount of money. I think it would be more productive if we look at their mission statements and figure out how many are actually doing the same thing, coming from a different angle. And maybe then they could figure out, well, let's put some of our operating costs together, consolidate. Now, that's a bigger thing. But we have a $133 million operating budget between our general funds and enterprise accounts. And I'd like to see us put more effort into that than the $450,000. And that's just one person's perspective, because I agree that with the hospital, it's all about dollars and cents, and if it's profitable, and if they're not going to take a Section 12 patient in for care because there's no check and balance, is the $450,000 going to help? It'll help a little bit.
Yeah, I think one of the things, Peter, that you raise is, in the perfect world, that would be great. My observation of the 2 years I've been on the committee, and Peter Stephen was there before me, is that I don't know that all of these agencies collaborate in the way that would allow redundancies to be eliminated amongst each other. Number one, it's capacity, and number two, I think it's also, here's my mission, I'm marching. So, and they're all, most of them are volunteer, not volunteer.
No, I understand.
So I'm not saying it isn't a worthwhile thing to try to encourage, but then now we're investing a lot behind the $450,000. So it's even more of an investment. So it's just something to keep in mind as we think about it. And one of the other things I think you would see, particularly in the hospital, tends to be the issue this year, and maybe Fairwinds was a couple of years ago, but the hospital, according to the person who now is responsible for this department, who's been in the healthcare industry for 20-plus years and worked all over the country, said this is the only hospital she's ever seen that provides social services out of a hospital. So it's more of a state agency or a town agency. So I'm cautious about pushing on it too much, in that it might go away altogether, because they could say, hey, look, no hospital does this, or isn't a benchmark on the planet to compare this to. So just some things to keep in mind as we try to figure out a sensible way through it. But there is quite a lot of work that goes into looking at who gets the
Understand.
450. It's, so, and to your point though, if 5,000 wouldn't really make a difference to these people, but a bigger chunk would to somebody else, then is there a way to evaluate that in the evaluation criteria? I'm done.
Okay, you got your,
Motion and a second, and we'll plan to ask Dorothy to come back before the end of the fiscal year.
yes.
Yes, and if we can get it done before March 25th, we'll see. I'm not sure she's here, so,
Okay,
okay.
very good. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We're going to tackle some of the capital expenditures. Article 10 A series of capital items that total, whatever they total,
13.3.
13,300,000. Have any individual questions in here? Everybody's comfortable with them?
I don't know if you want to wait until we talk about housing tomorrow, but as it relates to capital, I wonder if I can ask Peter if there's any, in the out years or in the near term, is there any design work or planning money or let alone construction money? Is there any money coming down the pipe for a senior center?
So there's probably, in my mind, as one Capcom member, I look at the following as in the placeholder, some of which don't have monies attached to them. And let me explain what that means. Usually the metamorphosis of a capital budget, by the time it's 2 years before the actual fiscal year it comes in, I'll use an example, our budget here came in at first at $80 million. Then it was proposed at $85 million. By the time it got to Capcom, it was up to 102. Then when it left Capcom, as our document specifies, it comes back at 98 million. So you can see how it changes within a short period of time. Some items that are not in those numbers are a senior center or our island home or a DPW or parking garage or the buildings at 2 fairgrounds with the consolidation, potential consolidation of some of our town assets. So even though our budget that was submitted was at 98 mil, there's probably 75 to 100 million dollars that aren't in that fiscal year, nor could they be, that are down the road as placeholders. So that's just a precursor to my thoughts on tomorrow.
So there.
I don't know if I answered your question, I'm sorry.
I'm not sure either. So is there in any of the years a placeholder, any figure? I see that there's, looks like $150,000 for a senior center relocation study. Is the Capcom thinking about, or has it written down anywhere in FY 2022, or, is there somewhere that there's a large sum coming for a senior center?
There is, but we don't have the sum yet.
What year is the Capcom thinking about this?
I don't believe we had it actually down as a specific year. We were told that here are some projects that are coming down the road that we haven't seen them, we haven't looked at prices, so we can't even, well, we didn't address them. Well, I wrote them down. And that's what's concerning about, from my perspective, is,
Well, yeah, I think.
is those amounts.
Yeah, I guess I'm just raising that concern that, if we had been thinking about $10 million 5 years from now, and we're leapfrogging that to 12 million.
Yeah.
Did I say thousand? I meant to say million. 5 years from now, and now we're thinking about some multiple of that right away, and we haven't done the planning for what the needs are, and we haven't done the relocation study, that's problematic. It's not the savings that, people are suggesting that it might be. So anyway, thank you.
Yeah.
But that really doesn't relate to this article, so.
Probably not, no.
So I move to adopt.
So we do not have any money in here.
Yeah,
to
so I
do planning.
digress and I move to adopt.
Okay,
Second.
thank you. Any other discussion? All in favor of the
Mr.
approval?
Apparently we do.
Oh,
Before you hopefully adopt in the affirmative, just to let you know, there may be some minor non-substantive changes to the technical reference under the borrowing authorities, but it will have no impact on
good.
the.
So you're not
actual-
raising the
No,
amount?
we're not changing the amounts.
But you are decreasing it, right?
Nice try, though.
Great.
Just to let you know.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, can we just revote that?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right. How about Old South, Article 11, Old South Road, Fairgrounds Road, intersection area, and Newtown Road transportation improvements, $5.2 million.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Milestone Rotary improvements, that's local support, so it's a non-monetary request, I believe.
Move to adopt the motion as written.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Town pier. Now, do you think, is the town pier going to come in at, let me put it this way, do you have a walking away number?
I don't have a walking away number, I don't think we've actually discussed that.
Yeah, I don't know that we've discussed a walking away number, but all professional input so far indicates that our maximum number, I don't want to say it because I don't want people to hear it and put in that number.
Well, here, then just hold up your fingers.
I don't want them to, we think our maximum number would hopefully not be exceeded.
Okay.
Now, you just did that twice.
I mean,
They're not added.
it's the one, it was just the one.
Okay.
Well, that was stealth.
But that being said, as we know, there have been some municipal projects recently where the bid came in way higher than anybody anticipated. But from what our engineering people have said, that they do not expect that with us.
Okay.
We're
So-
so,
No, go ahead.
that's it.
Bids are open on the 22nd.
The 20th.
20th?
We're going to have an evaluation done by the 22nd. For all of you who might not know it yet, we're hoping to schedule a FinCom meeting for Monday, the 25th, to review this with you, hopefully have you vote it, present the same thing to the Select Board on the 27th, and then have it in your technical amendments for the 27th.
Okay. So let's hold off voting on this. It sounds like we're going to have numbers. So. Landfill closure, Article 14, $14 million.
Motion to adopt?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Public safety auxiliary, facility auxiliary building, which is Article 15, $3 million.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
In-town Orange Street bike path, Article 16, $2.5 million.
Move to adopt the motion as written.
Second.
Discussion? Do either of you know engineering-wise how this is going to be done?
I don't want to speak out of turn, but I did have sort of a recent conversation about this. I think right now the engineering is to run from Goose Pond out to the Rotary with some road widening on either side. Or maybe the widening isn't totally resolved yet of which side, but the idea is there would be a separately delineated lane or path for bikes and pedestrians that's outside of the driving road.
Okay.
But I'm not totally sure which side of the street, because I think there's issues on both sides. And there are likely to be some amount of takings. There's some talk of, on the Marine Home Center side, if they're going to be redoing at some point, could there be easements given?
Okay. Takings would be in addition?
Takings would be included in this,
Okay.
is my understanding.
Okay. Great. So we have a motion that's been accepted. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Surfside Road, area road reconstruction. Article 17, $6.3 million. So these are improvements at Lover's Lane, Monahan, Set, and I can never pronounce this road anyway, so.
Motion to adopt.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
We're going to defer on Mirror Lane until tomorrow, but before we finish, we are going to say,
Could I go back to the in-town bike path for just a quick second?
sure.
I have received a reminder about this article. We already have some funds appropriated for design from earlier town meetings. Remain has funded some engineering already. It is a bike lane, not a path, and it would be on both sides of the road with an improved sidewalk on the Hatches side.
Great. Still want to go for the article?
Sounds better than before.
So, we'll deal with the Article 18 tomorrow, but before the end of the day, I'd like to come back to this and the other article because Joe's not going to be here tomorrow and maybe some others, and I think we'd all benefit from a little bit of a discussion on that so that we get your benefit of your wisdom on that, Joe.
Agreed.
So, Article 19, which is the Enterprise Fund Operations Budget. Any comment there? The only one that I saw that was different than what we were presented was the sewer number was about $130,000 lower than what we saw. So, otherwise, the rest of the numbers were as presented. And of course, the Wanacomit Water Company number is, they're never going to get to $5.9 million in expenses, so they're going to run another big profitable year.
Shareholders must be happy.
And the shareholders are very happy.
Move to adopt with the recommendation as written.
The Island Home, even though obviously the other entities make money, the Island Home doesn't make money. Just to clarify for me, I know it went to an enterprise fund, so it's, in a sense, no longer funded, but how would that line item disappear? Because we know that's an expense, so how did that just vaporize and we fund it with free cash? Why wouldn't we have just continued to have a line item for the Island Home in the general fund?
In the where?
The general fund, I mean, the Island Home's an enterprise fund.
Right.
Just like the water company is, but obviously the water company pays for itself. So,
Right.
because I think the answer was, I said, what happened, why isn't the Island Home funded, or what was the problem where this situation come about? And I was told, well, in 2011, when it became an enterprise fund. But we knew at that time it's going to have to be funded, regardless of whether it's an enterprise fund, which is the accounting method. So how do we not hold up, I just call it a line item for in the general fund for the Island Home?
Well, it's actually, I mean, if you look at the motion that has the funding source from we don't show this on the general fund budget, we show it in this line item here. In the budgetary structure that we build, there's, at the very bottom, there's other sources and uses, which is the transfer to the enterprise funds, one being for our Island Home and one being for solid waste. They don't get voted in Article 8, they get actually voted as part of the funding source here. So when you look at the funding source breakout, there's $2,026,000 that is fiscal 2020 tax levy and other general revenues. So that's how we account for it. It doesn't get voted as part of Article 8, it gets voted as part of this budget here, and the funding source is general fund tax revenues.
So it's still showing up as an enterprise fund budget item.
But we
Right.
keep doing it with free cash.
Well, no, we're funding the Island Home through user charges, retained earnings, and general fund subsidies.
Subsidy.
Maybe I'm still confused. All right, good.
And you did, I noticed, reduce the revenue number.
Yes, we did, yes. And hopefully, we're not gonna have to make any changes, but I'm still, we're watching this year very closely to see to make sure.
And what's your run rate so far?
We're gonna be very close to what we projected, or slightly behind, but as we do typically also have, some of that will be dependent on what CPE looks like. We haven't actually received the CPE
Right.
yet, but, again, in setting the tax rate in the budget for next year, we can't count that money, so we're paying really close attention to where we are at with, the user charges in and of themselves.
Mhm.
And we did have a change in private, patient revenue, which may provide a little bit of a buffer, but, it's looking like it'll be very close.
Okay. We don't have a second on this article.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. The next article is the capital expenditures associated with the enterprise funds. It looks like the airport probably being the biggest of those items. Just to remind everybody that they do get reimbursed, and either between 90 or 95%. I think it's generally been 95%. That assumes the state's kicking in money.
Is that the Fed?
And the Fed does the bulk. The Fed does 90%. I'm assuming, as we've discussed with the airport, that they would not be so bold as to go forward with these projects if they weren't going to get reimbursement. They're not going to hang you and us out to dry on this?
I'm going to assume that you're talking about the $19.1 million project
Yes.
more than likely. No, we would not let them go forward until we knew that they had until that finalization of the, infrastructure grant that's going to be approved under. In all of the modeling that we've done, I will tell you, we've built in 90% because we don't know if the state's actually going to kick in a 5% on that, because that was a separate authorization. But they would not begin unless they had pretty solid assurances that money was going to materialize. And we wouldn't let them go forward without knowing that was coming.
Great. Okay,
Motion, do we need a motion to adopt?
we do.
So moved.
Second.
Any other questions on any of the, for discussion, any of the other items? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. We have some cleanup to do on 21, which is some transfers from budget transfers in the enterprise funds. I think you've got, it looks like it's all airport. So from and to, Brian, I'd ask you, it doesn't really pertain either to Article 20 or 21, but I'm trying to remember from the audit that was done, the airport is not behind at all in their reimbursements. Are they pretty, they're not carrying a big receivable?
No, they're not. They submit reimbursements to the FAA on a very timely basis throughout their projects, so they're not a big receivable at this point, and they don't have a lot of projects going on. They're kind of slowing down and then getting ready, they'll ramp up with these, but there's not a lot outstanding right now.
And who at the airport's responsible for making sure that those reimbursements are done in a timely fashion?
Well, I think right now it's Jamie, the finance officer, and she typically works with, well, Katie's out right now, but Katie, who replaced Janine, is the two of them work in conjunction. And I will just point out that a lot of these transferred from retained earnings is keeping with the way the airport is doing things, where they're authorizing the borrowing on these, and then the smaller amounts, when retained earning is certified, they're then just paying them off, so there's actually no impact to the budget. So that's in keeping consistent with the way they've managed this for the last few years.
And their retained earnings pool is generated principally through transfers from the revolver?
Right, so it's in excess of what they've had planned to come in from the fuel revolver, is generally where the majority of it's generated from.
Right. A motion to
So moved. Adopt as written.
adopt is written.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Waterways Improvement Fund.
Move
This
to
is-
adopt.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Ambulance Reserve Fund.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Ferry embarkation fee. Am I correct in understanding, Libby, that these embarkation fees are not attached to commuter books?
Right.
Not that I'm trying to levy more money on myself, but,
I think that recently, the steamship began adding it to the commuter book, but the other boat line has not.
is there a statutory reason?
I guess it's a bit murky, and going back about a year ago or so, I could try to dig out some of my correspondence on this, but the steamship looked into it and evidently through a discussion with the Department of Revenue felt that they should start applying it to the commuter book. But I don't know if a similar discussion was had with the other boat line. I asked about it at the time, but
Amongst your many duties, if you have a moment, it seems like perhaps sending a letter to the management at Highline
I'll dig
indicating?
out, yeah, how I ended up with them.
I mean, I have no idea what the revenue number is, but it's got to be fairly substantial.
I think it actually turned out not to be as much of a windfall as it was initially thought, but let me dig back and I'll forward you a little report about it.
If not, ask them to put lights up at night when you unload your baggage cart so you can see what cart your baggage is in.
It's unbelievable.
I mean, would this be I guess, say a bylaw or not a bylaw? I mean, it was instituted somehow.
I think it's a state law,
Special
legislation, yeah. Some reason commuter books got exempted or just weren't being charged, so.
That's 600 times 5 days a week.
Motion to adopt.
Thank you, Joe. Move this conversation along. We have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. County assessment. This is a big dollar one.
Motion to adopt.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Why do I have, on my notes, did we, Oh, that's 26, the county budget, to take no action. We've already voted this, I think. Or maybe not.
I don't have it down as acted on.
Okay, I just have a note that it was take no action, but,
That's what it says in the
Yeah, that's
document.
Yeah.
the motion here. That's curious, why, that must have been recommended to us.
it was.
I don't think we would have done that.
That article is a placeholder in the event that the county advisory board and the county commissioners, which is you acting, or the county, whatever you act as, county review committee, if you and the county commissioners somehow disagreed on the budget, they would still have the opportunity to put it in here, but since inception, that has not happened. So it's a placeholder article in case it were to happen.
Would you like it to happen this year?
This happens
No.
every year?
No?
Never,
We could, we
No,
could
no.
make it,
No.
just to spice up town meeting. Confuse everybody.
The county.
I mean, this is one of the things, if I hadn't heard that explanation, I'd read it and go, what the hell's going on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is this? To overturn any denial of approval? Okay, well. Move to adopt the motion as written.
Second.
And this one.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Wait, actually, that was Article 26?
Yes.
Yeah, I apologize. Did I say 27?
No, but that was 26, but
Yeah.
if we've already voted to take no action, didn't we just,
Double.
maybe I wasn't listening
Well,
carefully.
No.
Did you?
I voted to adopt the motion as written, and the motion is
Okay.
Take no action.
Okay, sorry. Never mind.
OPEB, continuing our past year's practice of putting $500,000. Is there at some point, is the usefulness of doing this ended, or, I mean, in this age of big budget deficits, does anybody care anymore?
No, we care.
We care. We care.
And I think the
John
rating
Tiffany
agencies
can
cares
hear
that
you
we're
now.
still putting 500,000 in, because they ask about it every call. And there's discussion about whether we want to change it up on an upward basis, and we have talked to the board has voted to adopt when the pension windfall is changed, to put that into it, or when that's that amortization is fully funded, then to change it. So it's still useful, and it still has utility to do. Granted, it's probably going to be 30 years before we actually start inflows and outflows from it, but it's still good to continue to do.
Where is the deficit on this? I mean, is the deficit running away faster than we're putting money into it?
Well, yeah, we need about probably $6 million annually to get it on a fully funded schedule. But we're like
Over 30 years?
Yes, we're like every community, though. We're not the only
Every
community
company.
that, we're actually better than a lot of
$7 million
communities in
for
so
30
much as
years?
we're contributing to it, so,
He said we would need to give it $7 million annually for 30
Yeah.
years.
for 30 years. To
So
fully
it's a
fund it
$200
along the
million
way.
deficit?
Huh?
It's a $200 million deficit?
It's, the unfunded liability is about 90 million, but the annual required contribution to fully fund it over a life is about little over 6.5 million. Now, you have to remember, we are meeting a portion of it through what's known as pay-as-you-go by paying the cost of the retiree health insurance through Article 8. So it's not as if it's a 7 million and we're not doing anything, it's just that to fully fund it on its annual basis, we would need a substantial more money to contribute. So,
And interest rates aren't high enough so that we could buy this down, unfortunately. I mean, that'd be
we've
the
actually
other way.
asked about that too.
Yeah, I know, we've talked about it in the past, but
So,
the present value number's just way too big.
so.
Okay. At least we're doing something.
So, do we have a motion on,
Move to adopt the motion as written.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Affordable Housing Trust Fund. You want to talk about that, or do you want to delay that?
Well, should it go in hand with the housing discussion tomorrow?
It seems like this $3 million ought to be able to go to one housing idea or the other.
Yeah,
Okay, let's roll it into tomorrow.
yeah.
Yep.
Article 29, stabilization fund for airport employee accrued liabilities. Trying to remember, the auditors okay with this?
They are, yes. It's basically, all it is building up a fund to pay for any of the accrued balances of leave time that when somebody left employment would be obligated to pay, so they're okay with this.
And do they have any sense that that's coming soon for employees? I mean, is there something that's driving this?
Well, it was driven last year by the fact that when they looked at their employee list, they knew that there were potentially some retirees coming in the next few years that would potentially have contractually obligated payouts that would put a strain on their budget. So while they have some ability to do this now, they've been trying to be forward planning and put some aside to cover it.
Okay. A motion on this article?
Motion to adopt as written?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Article 30, which is language related to their revolver, their fuel revolver, which looks like it's extending it so that they can do some repairs.
Motion to adopt.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Senior Work-Off Program, Article 31.
Move to adopt as written.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Now, my notes indicate that the next set of articles from 32 through up to 36, we voted already.
You take a look at 35. What I sent you via email
Yes.
changed a tiny bit because Ally brought to my attention that she believed your comment should have had that wording in there and it didn't earlier, so I added it.
Mm-hmm.
It's highlighted in yellow.
Okay.
Just want to make sure that that reflects.
Was it intentional that we moved to appropriate 100,000 instead of the requested 110,000?
Oh, that changed also. It should have been,
110?
but.
Yeah, it's
so
in
I've
here as
changed it, but you
110.
might- Yeah,
It's in on the one that came out today.
Mine came out today.
Hmm?
Mine's dated today, too. I just must have the morning edition.
there
It's
was.
a two newspaper
one edition.
town. Okay. I can, that, so are we comfortable with the comment, the one-time funding?
Can someone read the comment, just because I'm not sure whether I've got
Okay.
the final version?
The one I have says, "The committee urges Nantucket Cottage Hospital to secure a permanent non-town funding source for this service. The committee's motion is intended to provide one-time funding only." I can report that I ran into Mr. Marshall at the coffee shop just before this meeting, and I discussed the fact that Finance Committee was pretty adamant about this being a one-time effort. He reported to me that they believe that they actually have a funding source for this that will be permanent. So,
Excellent.
I'm sinking all of a sudden.
That's right, it's just you go down.
Yeah.
Sort of odd.
which would be great.
Yes, that'd be excellent.
So, people are working to take care of this. So, we don't have to, do we have to revote this article with the changes? Okay.
I just have a question on the CPC one. if
Yep.
we voted on it, where they're giving money to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, so they're also giving $750,000 to the
Yep.
Affordable Housing Trust Fund. But it's noted in here that it's only for projects that they decide that they approve. So is there then an additional approval process?
So CPC needs to approve the expenditure?
That's what it looks like. Am I reading it right?
They have a lot of bosses.
I took it to mean projects that the Affordable Housing Trust Fund approves, because I think that 700 was an alternate way of funding Housing Nantucket and Habitat, maybe some other housing agency, but, in prior years, Habitat and Housing Nantucket got individual allocations by the CPC. I think that's what Ken discussed, is what they were doing, is they're taking capital they used to give directly to those agencies and do it through the Affordable Housing Trust Fund.
Okay. Because I just read it that that allocation to the fund, subject to the fund obtaining approval from the CPC commissioners of the particular projects for affordable housing.
So you think they have to go back and get sort of a second approval?
That was the question.
Yeah.
That's what
Yes,
that
they do.
says.
Yes.
Okay.
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 Do you want any more explanation? I mean, I'm happy to bring it back tomorrow.
No, that's good.
Okay. Article 64. So, establishing a membership quorum for the advisory committee for non-voting taxpayers.
So amending it from 8 to a majority of the serving members?
Yeah.
Okay. Move to adopt the motion as written.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. 65, Council for Human Services, which would change the council from 9 to 7 Nantucket residents. Is there a statutory requirement that people be residents for many of these committees? Or is it a preference?
It really all depends on the wording of the bylaw. So some actually say voters. This one says residents, so I don't, it doesn't define.
I just wonder if perhaps, to the extent that one can, broadening it, it looks though like it's probably written into the code. Okay. So we're going from 9 to 7 Nantucket residents for the Council on Human Services. Is there a motion?
Motion to adopt?
Second?
Any more discussion? Or any discussion?
Do we know why?
They asked for, it because they're having trouble getting the quorum.
Yeah,
I know that feeling.
I think that's what's driving a lot of the. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. 66 is a bylaw amendment to noise, the noise ordinance. Was this put forth by the select board?
Does this pertain to that guy driving around with the big bass? Have you heard him? Shakes my windows. They boom, boom, boom. His ears have to be gone by now.
It doesn't pertain to that, even though I would support including that. But this more had to do with, we got a lot of complaints this year in particular about noise, power, outdoor construction noise in the morning and at night. So this was a bit of an attempt to give a little bit of relief, particularly to people who are, it's right there. It's not a big change, but it's over.
Okay.
Motion to adopt as written.
Second.
We have a second? Peter?
Second. Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Underground or above-ground fuel storage tanks, or underground fuel storage tanks, or both. Is there any change to this, or just a numbering change?
I think the highlighted part is new.
Yeah, it's new.
Okay.
And do you have to, I know it sounds silly, but do you have to specify the volume of the fuel storage tank? So for example, if someone ever wanted to interpret this as the storage tanks people have at their homes?
This is intended to be for,
I know it's intended to be, but,
no, I mean, it is for people
At home.
oh,
So
okay.
who's this driven by? Oh, so they're just going by state law, or?
Probably came out, I could dig around and see how it came about, but, it probably does have to do with some kind of state law.
So you're telling me that all the storage tanks on island have a 4-inch concrete slab underneath them?
Only if they're above
not
ground.
yet.
Above ground.
I know,
I think,
but I'm
I
just.
think that
yeah.
recently that's been, that's been the practice. But now
Okay.
they're saying if you sell your house and you haven't met that standard, you
You're
have
s-
to meet that standard.
They say 110%. The only thing that I'm interested in, if you have a 500-gallon tank,
You need
Does
a
it-
550
does it come
gallon.
that way, though? Or do you have to go from 500 to 750? I mean, is it a substantial increase in cost because you have to get to 110?
Yeah, that
No, you
phrasing is
build,
strange because-
you have to build a containment to hold 550
Oh, the
gallons.
containment, not the actual tank.
Container.
Correct.
Okay.
Either a double-walled tank or a 110% containment.
Right, so if it's underground, it would be a double-walled tank.
One
I
would
assume.
hope.
Usually if they're built underground, they're also built in a vault.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you think the cost of putting a double-walled tank in is a lot, try fixing the problem after it leaks.
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
It's a problem.
Okay. Any just further discussion on Article 67? I'm going to motion that article.
Motion to adopt as written.
Second.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Sewer map changes. The select board has gone through these, I assume. Did they approve all of them? Does the finance committee have any objections to the select board's adjudication on these articles?
Is that 68 through 70?
Yeah, 68, 69, and 70. Can we vote them all as one motion? Somebody make a motion?
Motion
Please.
to adopt 68, 69, and 70?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Bicycles. Ms. Gibson, I think we're going to need to call on you again.
So,
To get the latest iteration of where we are on this.
you had a motion not to adopt, I think. Or maybe it was actually supposed to be.
Take no action.
Okay. And so I drafted this comment, and then there was some subsequent discussion with the citizen petitioner. And he is out of the country right now, so I haven't been able to determine whether or not he would be okay with the motion, the sort of alternate motion that's in there. So that the alternate motion is, as shown there, which I tried to make it a little more action-oriented. but I haven't really heard back from him. He's not going to be back till, I think he said the 11th or so. So I'm just not sure if he supports this or not. And the select board may be making a comment on the article as well at their meeting this week. But I think the bottom line here is that there's, from a town administration perspective, it's, I think, what I tried to let the petitioner know, it's my job to view all the articles that come forward and make sure that if we're going to be putting them forward and putting them on the warrant and voting them, that we can make them happen. And this one in particular is going to be a bit difficult to make happen because there are some elements of confusion in the article itself. They're not illegal, but things like, a bicycle being 3 feet from a vehicle if it's on the road, not on the bike path, how are law enforcement people going to be able to measure that? Although apparently there are some state law changes underway with regard to vehicles and bikes sharing the road types of things. So there probably are some state law things coming anyway, which may address some of this. So if that is underway, I would say, why don't we let that happen instead of having our own sort of special rule on this, which could be difficult to enforce. The signage, I think you talked about this already a little bit a couple of weeks ago. If we're going to go to the letter of this bylaw, there are a lot of signs that are going to need to be installed. Some of them might be on private property. I don't even know if that can happen. So the idea was, okay, let's put up some signs, but let's identify the areas where they may be most critical. And working with the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee, that could be a project for them to identify with. And I think there may already be an effort underway to do just that. So I mean, it's up to you all. I'm just trying to make a bylaw that has a lot of very detailed information in it, which is going to make it, sometimes it's more difficult that way. All of this stuff about the reporting, a lot of it is stuff, some of it is information that the town is already collecting and recording, but not every little thing, and we can't make a third party like the hospital give us their information. Apparently they have somebody who's willing to do that now, but what happens when that person leaves? So bylaws need to be written to, not, to be able to be operationally
Not situational.
efficient. Yes, thank you. Anyway, that's where I was coming from.
So,
So we can't really vote on this.
well, we can. If we don't settle it today or tomorrow, we're not going to have anything in the printed warrant, so people aren't going to see where we, at least going into town meeting, come down on this article. So I'd be inclined, if not today, tomorrow, to vote on it, or I guess we've already voted on it, which was take no action. I think we're probably, unless we want to reconsider that.
We move not to adopt, which as we know is different than take no action.
What's printed is move not to adopt.
I'm sorry?
See, we voted for it, and then we found out it cost $80,000, and we reversed our vote.
To take no action.
But
To-
here in the thing, it says not to adopt.
It says move to take no action.
We have to take no action.
Yeah, I've got it as take no
So
action.
you guys have a
But
later
the one that
edition.
went out, no, but the one that went out today
That's today.
is
I
move
got
not to
it.
adopt.
Oh, okay.
I know, I don't think we got the afternoon
right.
edition.
I don't think there was an option.
But
No, there was, because a
Oh.
couple of times we've seen David has something that we don't have, which is fine. But I also saw move not to adopt. So if it's take no action and that's the action we took, I wouldn't support a motion to reconsider that, but somebody else might.
To reconsider, not to adopt or take no action? What do we?
We have voted take no action.
Okay.
Correct?
Yep.
And I would not entertain a motion to reconsider that.
Okay. So now we're talking about what do we want our comment to say?
I, for one, if being so bold, if you look at the comment that's written on our document, I would put a period after lead to a conclusion, period, end of comment. I would strike everything that says, and it would be costly to implement a proposed signage. And I also would advise us not to avail any town department or committee to pick and choose what they think is a high level of risk. I think we're asking for potential litigation. So I would put a period after confusion.
In the first finance committee comment.
That's correct.
I like that. I agree with you.
It's always a first time.
Good thing it's being recorded.
You guys don't disagree that much, do
We
you?
never disagree.
No.
He's just being playful.
Is there a real concern that we're opening ourselves to litigation if we tell somebody, put signs where you think they're needed? I mean, that seems like the common sense thing to do, but is the concern writing it down? Because then if there's an accident somewhere else, they say, well, how come you didn't consider that?
That would be my fear, just mine.
Yeah, we already have bicycle laws that nobody adheres to, so I don't know. It seems like there's no lights, summertime, every crazy person has a bicycle. I would never do that, but,
I think having signs in some places and not others is confusing.
yeah, but we don't I don't think we give tickets out for bicycle violations now because they never stop at a stop sign. So, I don't know.
Right when you pull into here, there's like 9 signs
Right.
for the bikes, just right here. And I'm sure nobody's ever gotten a ticket right in front of the police station.
I don't know, sounds like a can of worms.
But somebody determines where these signs go now. Is it the Department of Public Works, Libby? Who determines where the bike signs go now?
There's some sort of state guideline.
And that's what they're following. That's sufficient for me.
Okay.
So where are we in terms of the comment then? So the motion should be, motion to take no action. And
The comments edited according to
for
Peter's
the
proposal.
first of the two comments, so the committee appreciates the petitioner's effort to address bicycle safety, period. Committee finds that the bylaw as written is not realistically likely to be enforceable, which is likely to lead to confusion, period.
Period.
Done.
And you don't want, well, I said at the last sentence, I think the committee recommends that Public Works Department work with the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee to identify areas with high levels of risk for which signage could be installed within the budget of the department. It seems to me that's what we sort of agreed to when.
Yeah.
And are we as a committee, if
Jason and the
we
folks were
agree to, at least to confusion, now you're telling another committee, you take care of the
It's
confusion.
confusion,
I
yeah.
think that's bad for
Yeah.
us. And I would just remove our comment all in its entirety.
Because one would suggest that the Public Works Department and the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee already work together and could figure this out.
Yeah, but the last sentence,
So why does the
Is-
Finance Committee have to tell them to do it?
because, I mean.
Because we don't wanna do
Because
it.
we're not, I mean, we're charged with advising town meeting on all articles. So, we're suggesting that from a financial perspective, we don't want to see a new allocation here. So work within the budget, determine where signs can go. We're not commenting here that all the other parts of the article, which may be not enforceable or likely, as that sentence tells you, are not enforceable or could lead to confusion. We're just saying, put signs where they're needed within the budget. I don't think that's incongruous at all.
Well, then I would take out with high levels of risk. The committee recommends that the Public Works Department work with the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee to identify which signage could be installed within the budget of the department. Understanding that both of those places should be able to do high levels of risk on their own without us telling them that's their job.
Sure.
So if that's normalcy, then why even comment?
I mean, I think we tell people what to do all the time in our comments.
I mean, that's,
That's the
that's what
point of
we've been
that.
doing for the past few months.
Okay, let's not overthink this one, though.
Yeah, I mean, to Peter's point, if risk is something to worry about, then the phrase "with high levels of risk" could be struck. If we're not worried about that, then keep the sentence as it is and tell them to stick within the budget when they put their signs up.
It's just a flawed motion. That's
And we're
the
making,
reality of this. And I mean, because we have a $140 million budget and we can't afford to appropriate some money for additional signs. I mean, that seems somewhat ridiculous as well.
Well, it's not just the signs, though. It's going to
It's
change
the-
driving behavior, which potentially
I
could be
get the-
very confusing.
Yes, I get that part of it, but the piece about, I think that, I think we should keep it in there that we should encourage them to work together to figure out where the sign should be, so that we are making some sort of positive action on this, besides saying, no, I get it's not enforceable legally piece of it.
But that's what they already do. We don't have to tell them to do what they already do. That's what the
Except for
advisory
that, I think the guy's
group-
trying to say it could be improved.
I think he has.
We're spending too
I'm not
much
sure
time on
what
this.
the-
Yes,
That's
we are.
what BPAC is for, so maybe we just say bicycle pedestrian, what is it, action?
Advisory committee.
Advisory committee, you know.
And just
they
take,
should-
let's take the word high levels of risk out and just say, areas, the two groups work together to determine areas where signage is appropriate.
Let's just
something
go
along
back to
those lines.
Peter's suggestion, put the
Okay.
period after confusion.
I agree with that.
Would you like to make a motion, Peter?
I make a motion that the Finance Committee, we're upholding our move to take no action on the article, and the committee appreciates the petitioner's effort to address bicycle safety. The committee finds that the bylaw as written is not realistically likely to be enforceable, which is likely to lead to confusion,
Period.
period.
We should have taken out some likelies.
Yeah, I would take
We're
out the
done.
second, yeah, okay.
Too many like.
Okay. Ally, did you sort of get the gist of it? Okay. If you want to run,
Is it likely?
if you want to run
Correct,
that,
Ally?
if you want to run that by someone, run it by Peter, not me.
I'm leaving tomorrow for vacation.
Doing the evening edition. Okay. Article 75, there's been a request by the town manager to revisit that article, so I'm going to accede to her request and would ask if somebody would make a motion, since I think we adopted our recommendation unanimously, if somebody would vote for a reconsideration, and then we can have a discussion on it. Somebody make that,
Make a
move that
to
motion?
To reconsider Article 75.
One second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye, thank you.
So basically, it's that in reading through the motion, the article and the motion in much greater detail, specifically the last part of it, report to annual town meeting, April 2020, this timing just is not going to work, as it's indicated in my comment. And I don't know if the committee wants to make a change to the timing, but I also just put before you that the Board of Health at any time could have a work group that looks at this. And perhaps they will after seeing it. So, that's it.
So what would help if we changed 3C from February 1st, 2020 to November 1st, 2019? Would that help?
That could help. Let me just run through the timing with you. So even at November 1st, 2019, if the point is to have a report to, okay, let me back up even more. Report to the annual town meeting. If report means an article, there's going to have to be a whole lot of public outreach and a whole lot of work done between after the 2019 annual town meeting and basically in the next 4 to 5 months, because we're going to start talking about warrant articles in October. Is that group going to have a report by then that can be turned into an article, that can get the legal review, that can have the public hearings that are going to be needed
I mean,
in order to bring it before town meeting? I'm just thinking back to prior attempts by the Board of Health to have rental regulations, which were disastrous.
well, notwithstanding that it might be a disaster, I think we, can advance a report that suggests something. Maybe it won't be all encompassing. I mean, we just found out about Nantucket Inn and $30 million and all sorts of stuff like 6 weeks ago.
True.
And we advanced to put it not only on the warrant, but on the ballot. I think there's some stuff that can be done on the margins here, if not a full set of regulations. There is work that can be done, and I'd hate to see this get pushed off to a special town meeting that's not planned or 2021. I just think some work can be done here.
I'm not arguing about it, I'm just saying that there's a lot of work that's gonna have to be done here by people, and so I hope they can do it.
What do you think, what is the intention behind this?
I can't really speak to the intention,
I
because I'm
mean,
not
is
the citizen.
this a illegal renter crackdown, or is this an Airbnb thing?
I don't think it has to do
Later
with
in the year.
Airbnb in particular. I think it's just something that a lot of resort communities like ours have. And I think that what Judith intended here is just that the town start to take a look at adopting some or,
Right.
some modified version of what other communities like ours have done.
So, but you just said the key word, so it's resort community piece, so if that's a seasonal rental. So I do know that some other towns in Massachusetts have done things like require anyone who's doing seasonal rentals to make sure that the apartment is inspected and has a smoke detector, and they charge a fee for that. So I'm not sure, I guess in this whole scheme of things, because to Libby's point, this does seem like a lot of work, why do we have to do all this other stuff if there's like a smaller step that we can take where we do something?
Well, if you look at the purposes, she explains why she wants it. And if you go to I, underneath the purposes, I'm guessing that's probably the key one. Or the thorn and,
Yeah, and I said that it's about resort communities. I don't think that this article is only about resort communities. I think it's about health and safety issues in all types of rentals, all types of residential rentals. I don't think this whole thing can be studied thoroughly, and a full set of unassailable proposals is going to be put together in 6 months, but something can be done in 6 months.
I don't disagree.
But I do think that it needs to be 6 months, even if it's incomplete in November. The work needs to stop so that we can vet it and, discuss it and then vote it. And then, the process can continue afterward.
one of the things though, if you take a look under topics of study, and you have to do everything under D in 6 months, I would want to see a change in this that says the work group shall consider as much of the following matters as possible within a 6-month time or something, because it says at least the following matters, which means all of that
Shall consider matters
stuff.
such as, maybe.
Or we have a comment that says, we applaud the comprehensive nature of what they want to study, however,
Well, that's just in our motion, so we could just change it.
yeah. So I'm just saying that if you take a look at those and try to get a committee together and then get them to have something sensible to say about, 1 through 11, that is not, educational strategies, data collection and management. This is not a small activity.
Right.
No, I agree. I think
Yeah.
it should be.
I think
So it
such
should
as
be,
this.
yeah, rather than at least.
Could we just trim the whole thing down and make a motion to say that these groups of people should just have a discussion about this and prepare a report on the feasibility of it, but eliminate some of these many steps? Or say these steps could be considered but are not required to be considered.
Yeah, I think we're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be reluctant to take a citizen's article and interpret what should or shouldn't be in. I think it would be easier for us to recommend that the times be extended.
Okay.
Or even,
It seems to me it's logical that a report could be done in time for informational purposes by the next town meeting. That's a year. But preparing articles and regulatory
I see what you're saying.
information and doing the outreach that goes along with it. I think Libby's right. There's probably, and Stephen, you may know better than all of us, will be pushback on this, and, I guess it's going to be up, how much stamina does the committee have to push through this?
I think that's my concern about extending the deadline. If there is going to be push.
Also for this?
No. No, this would just be volunteers, probably a lot of Google research and some discussions is what I imagine this is going to look like. Which is the reason I think you keep the sooner deadline. You don't require that they do all steps, all 11 things here. You say you can do any of the things that you can get to. Come to us with a report, and the report might be, we haven't finished yet. But at least, we know that this is advancing. Or we don't think it's a good idea, and you
So
vote that way.
how does it work then, once we get the report? What are the potential, what do we do with it?
We don't do
not
That's the
us.
thing
We
that I
don't do
get.
anything.
We don't do anything with it, but what does
Yeah.
the town do with it?
Depends on what it
If
says.
we're going to amend 3C and change that date, I think we amend 3D, and we don't require that the select board do anything. The select board will receive the report by a certain date, maybe you strike 3D altogether, and the select board doesn't have to advance anything. I think that's probably equally problematic to the deadline of the report, is that we're requiring the select board to do something.
Yeah, I think the part about the reporting to the 2020 annual town meeting doesn't seem to be like a realistic thing.
Well, we can't bind future town meetings. Why should we be able to bind a future select board? Like,
Yeah.
maybe legally it's okay, but it doesn't seem appropriate.
I mean, all we're doing is making a comment, guys. I mean, we're not going to rewrite this article,
Right.
Why not?
because I don't think
It's a
it's within our
citizen's article.
purview. It's the citizens' article. We can make a comment that would say,
No, we-
strike X, Y, and Z.
But we make motions that change articles all the time. I don't understand what the difference is.
Either that, or we should reconsider the vote and take no action, and then say in the comment, the way that your article is written doesn't make any sense as to whether it could be effective. We get what you're saying, but it doesn't seem to be an effective way to get what you want to happen.
By a certain date. That's the issue, right? It's probably effective.
Or,
but-
to Stephen's point, you can't tell, they can't say you have to make a report at the next year's town meeting.
All right, I'm going to use some prerogative here,
Please, please.
which is that we're going to wait 24 hours on this article, because I do want to hear from Joe on housing, and we're going to get out of here at 6 o'clock. So,
Oh, you didn't want to go 76 just for fun? Okay. Move not to adopt.
no, we've already
voted on it.
voted that one.
I was not here.
Oh, for the complaint committee? For fun.
So, so we're going to come back to this tomorrow, so, Johnny, if you want to sleep on this and come up with some language,
Okay.
you too, Stephen.
This looks like somebody copied this directly from some other town.
Yeah.
That's right,
So-
Julian.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yep.
we're letting this motion die
For 24 hours.
for 24 hours or less.
Have we voted on everything now except for 18 and 37 and?
No, we have a few more to do, but those won't take very long tomorrow. I think we only have 4 or 5. So, so we've got the 2 housing articles. As I said, Joe's not going to be here tomorrow. Tucker will be here. I'll make sure that Tobias or representative is here as well, so that we can have whatever final discussions we want to have on those articles. Thoughts? So we heard about the Nantucket Inn last time. I thought we had a pretty good discussion. I think it was certainly helped highlight some of the issues that we're probably going to hear on town meeting floor. And, we have the opportunity after discussion tomorrow to make a comment or two or nothing. So, general thoughts from a couple of weeks ago, and Joe, I'm looking to you specifically.
I mean, I guess where I came out on this, and I wrote and gave David sort of draft comments for the FinCom, which we can use or not use. I really used it as.
Can you send them to me electronically?
I thought I did, but
Oh, I
I will
yeah,
send them
thank you.
again. Now, I have multiple copies, if you don't mind my sharing.
Oh, sure, then do that. That's fine.
Okay. Actually, give me one so I know what I'm talking about.
Is it one page? No.
There's you take 3 pages. It's Article 18, and then is a single sheet, and then Article 37 is sort of a page and a half. And I guess where I come from on both these articles is, number one, I am personally supportive of the town directing taxpayer funds, capital, to affordable housing purposes. I think that both of these articles represent rather large amounts of money that the town can afford, or we can certainly raise the money to fund them. But they're certainly big and have financial risk in that sense. And what I tried to do in both of these comments for the rest of the committee, and like I said, you can use it or throw it away, whatever you guys think, is try to think about framing how the FinCom looked at these articles, what we saw as positives and negatives, and kind of lead to whatever recommendation or move or motion that we take on the article. On the Miller Lane, on Nantucket Inn, I think, on balance, even though it's a lot of money and there are some financial risks, I think it looks like, to me, kind of the more efficient of the 2 projects in terms of cost per affordable unit. It certainly has more risks in terms of complexity, needing an outside real estate developer, things that could go wrong, what the abutters may or may not say. But I think you'd get more affordable units for your $25 to $35 million out of that project. Tobias and Rick's idea, I think tends to look, to me, looks like it's more expensive in terms of cost per affordable unit, sort of, it's going to spend $800 to $1 million per house, and you may get multiple units depending on what sort of renovations you do, but that looked to me to be sort of a more costly. But on the other hand, I think it's sort of an interesting idea, and had they come to the FinCom, the town, and said, gee, we want to try this for $3 to $5 million, I think I would have been much more enthusiastic about it. And that's sort of the way I framed both of these comments. I'm not sure what else to say. And again, I thought both of these, in terms of, and I think I've said this at meetings before, part of my concern is these are both big, complicated proposals. We don't have a lot of time on the Nantucket Inn one came to us fairly short time ago. If this was something you were trying to do as a developer, you'd be taking months and months to review it and plan it and have a much more cogent proposal for your investors or or in this case, the town. But we don't have that time. So I tried to come up with something that was simple, that we could communicate to the town as a comment on in the warrant, and that would make some sense as to whatever conclusion we came to. And the way I've written them, you could probably make any motion you want, but it depends on how you want to, which of the pluses and minuses you think in your own mind make the most sense. So that's where I came out.
Great, well, and thank,
And I should say, in general, I would actually, on the Nantucket Inn, I probably would vote in favor of adoption of that article. And on Tobias and Rick's article, I would encourage them to reduce the amount below 20. And if it got down to, say, $4 or $5 million, I would personally vote for that one as well.
Yeah, the one thing, I think we're, in the housing units, it's going to be a little bit of apples to oranges, because I think Tobias's concept is more real housing, where the Nantucket Inn is really going to be starting housing, in my opinion. I mean, you're going to go there, but it's not a place you're going to stay for the rest of your whatever.
Right. If you were to look at it on a cost per bedroom, then the numbers flip in the other direction.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, meaning?
Meaning Tobias's proposal, if you look at the units he's described, there's 53 bedrooms as opposed to the 39 in the other proposal. The other significant difference that I think we need to keep in mind as we discuss these tomorrow is the Nantucket Inn proposal assumes that all of the renovation costs, the $150,000 estimate per unit for the conversion, will be paid for by state housing tax credits. So, you know, on the per unit basis calculations where they get to $345 or something $1,000 per unit, that doesn't include the conversion. And that includes, you know, the $12 million written off for the front building. Whereas, you know, we could quibble about what the, and it's not a quibble, it's a significant criticism, but we could talk about what the cost will actually be to make the changes that Tobias is proposing for all these lots, including new construction, you know, including renovation. But none of the, you know, all those costs are included in Tobias's $15 or $16 million estimate. You know, there's not the assumption that state and federal tax credits would be available for all those things.
Right. No, I agree.
And that's significant. I think, you know, when we talk about comparing the cost per unit, we need to look at what type of unit we're producing and who's paying for them. Because if you add in $150,000 for each of the 39 units, that, you know, $15 million figure for Nantucket Inn, that's just the housing portion, not the front building, it balloons to a much higher number.
You know, but you can also say that the Nantucket Inn is probably, probably, all these things, you don't really quite know how they're gonna turn out, right? But, you know, you have I think you have a higher probability of getting 39, at least 39 units out of the, converting the hotel. In terms of the Tobias Rick article, number 18, I personally don't think they're gonna be able to buy more than 2 or 3 houses a year, so it could be a long time before they actually acquire and upgrade and convert and end up with 10 or 20, you know, housing units. I don't know what's the bedroom size. But I also think it's kind of, it's an idea that it could work, and it has the beauty of, if you try it for a couple of years at a lower scale, it proves itself out. You learn what kind of houses to buy, what sort of renovations work, how to control your costs, how you take care of them and run them as a rental business. It could work just fine. It just will ramp up over time.
Yeah, I think that's,
Could work, I mean.
that's a good point. And I also think, you know, one of the things that I like about it, that I like about Tobias's article, is that he's broadened the scope of what the money can be used for. So now it's almost anything and everything that's going to allow for shy eligible units to be created, whether it's the town owns them by acquiring properties, or the town buys a property and then adds a unit, or now they can buy down an affordability restriction on an existing unit. You know, that last option is the most attractive to me, because I don't want to see the town in the maintenance business. You know, I do want to see the town use taxpayer funds to subsidize the creation of shy eligible units. But the proposition that we're going to be maintaining dozens of units for years to come, or that we would find an operator who isn't going to come back to us for future maintenance bills, that's a scary proposition for me. So, you know, I like that we haven't identified exactly what the properties are in Tobias and Rick's article, but it's very broad. And we would have the opportunity on a piecemeal basis to identify or to vet each project as it comes. And I think you're right, a smaller sum of money is the more appropriate way to do it.
I mean, but I've said this to Tobias, I think that my biggest problem with this article, and I know he wants to go from 30 down to 20 now on the town meeting floor, is it's appropriating $30 million to an idea to a couple of guys and a dog who they've never done this before. Now, I think it could work, but I
it's
just
not
feel more
gonna be-
comfortable giving them,
Yeah.
appropriating a smaller amount of money, letting them sort of gear up and test the concept, and if it works, well, you can always give them more money. So,
Yeah.
To your point, Joe, if Tobias has got, say, 20 million tomorrow, who actually is going to do this? Is it going to be the Affordable Housing Trust? Is it going to be Libby part-time? Just to keep you involved, Libby? Brian helping you?
Who would do it? Well,
Well, who does either of them?
I know, but I wanted to work on Tobias's first.
Yeah.
Any borrowing that the town does under its statutory authority relative to creation of affordable housing has to be undertaken by an entity actually statutorily allowed to create affordable housing. So the mechanics all haven't been worked out, but arguably it would have to be more one entity that could be participating, and it would be the Affordable Housing Trust Fund.
Okay. So there's someone in that organization who would then have a project on their hands,
There
effectively.
would be someone
Not just
or
one person, but-
It's a
committee would have
it's a
a project on their
voluntary
hand.
board.
No, I mean, really, a line item in either project has to be for an OPM or something similar to that. You know, somebody with professional experience in
Yeah.
doing these kinds of things. Because nobody exists on the town's payroll with the
Right.
with the experience and the bandwidth to
bandwidth.
take it on.
So what's that expense?
It's significant, but small in comparison to either of these appropriations, but not in either proposal, and that's important.
Where are we at with the evaluation of the front building on the Nantucket Inn? Because I think that to me is where some risk lies.
A lot of it.
Yeah.
You have to work backwards from whatever the intended use is, and then whatever the upgrades would need to be to get it to a usable place. You know, I've heard that it's turnkey and you can use it right away, but I haven't heard that from an engineer. You know, I haven't heard that from the organizations that would actually have to operate it.
I mean, that seems to me like a huge project for the town to take on. It's not just relocating the senior center. It's renovating an entire building and figuring out how to use it so that they come close to breaking even.
Right, and what are the payroll, let alone operational costs of that new building?
Yes.
The senior center idea, I do disagree. I do think you could move in there at the senior center, maybe not using the entire building, obviously, and then you could operate it turnkey compared to what we have now, which is nothing, you know? Structurally, obviously, things have to be looked at and safety and all that, but I think you could. I am, you know, this goes back and I expressed it the other night, I don't think that building is worth anywhere near $12 million. And if somebody has to knock it down to put something else there, it becomes a whole different discussion. And what do we want in front of this housing that we're going to build? Do we want to have something else put up there? I don't know, another hotel that could go into that space instead. I mean, I don't know. The question becomes that unless the town is willing to take that building under its control, and there's many, many uses the town could use it for. You know, obviously, there's not enough space anywhere in the town, then it becomes a different discussion. The 12 million maybe becomes 6 million, or whatever the number might be, because we're gonna have to spend that money anyway. So I don't, it's a tough decision. I don't see it as commercial. I don't see it, but maybe I'm wrong.
So following your comments last week and thinking through this, where I got to about the front building is put the housing portion aside, so we're talking about $12 million. If we're off on that estimate, and as I was talking earlier, let's say it's really only worth $6 million. So now the question becomes, where in this equation do you find the other $6 million? And I'd offer up a couple of things. One is we've put no value on the back portion of the property where more housing could be built. So that's got some value.
Regardless, right?
Correct. But if you're concerned about whether the 12 is really 12, I would say, let's say it's 6. Now you still have the back portion, you've still got value in that you can look to, if you will. But in my mind, by figuring out where different value portions of this project come to, I can see that this risk, and I'll put aside the risk associated with doing the renovations and stuff like that. I can see where the $27 million nominally, that risk, can be brought down to only a few $1,000,000. And to me, that then absolutely gets into the realm of this may be an investment that's worth taking the risk on. So I do not think that this rises and falls totally on the basis that that front building has to be 12 million. We have to figure out how to get $12 million worth of value out of it.
No, but what you're saying that I think is interesting and I like is that you're going to trade the value of those back lots. So say, because in my mind, you sell the front building, right? If
Well-
you get $5 or $6 million for it, and the value of the back building is increased because you have of those other places you can build, and we're out of the business of trying to figure out what to do with that front building altogether. And somebody, to the point, does put up a hotel there that is moderately priced and has the rooms that TSA can stay at and worker people can stay at. That would happen more quickly. And you'd get back some of your money.
But it still goes back, I'm so confused because we still own that property in the back anyway. So no matter what we do, if we make an investment in that land, we own the front building, the buildings that we want to convert to housing, and the back part.
Yeah,
It's all
but-
part of the package.
Sure, but our discussion ends up being, is the front building worth $12 million? And all I'm saying is that it doesn't have to be worth $12 million because you got value in the back. And so if it's worth $6 million, okay, so it's not worth 12, it's worth 6, but you got value in the back that you've not put into your equation. And let's say the value in the back's $3 million. So now I've taken basically ended up with a $3 million risk in this project, which, seems to get to the realm of acceptability, at least for my risk tolerance on something like this. But,
I mean,
that's just, that's the benefit of how I sort of have
Yeah, but
been trying to think about this project.
I think your numbers are about right. You have a little over an acre and a half in the back, commercial land that's worth about $3 million. But
Notwithstanding, though, that the FedEx building sold for what, low threes, and it's 0.75 acres. That's what Sully said last week, I think, or 2 weeks ago.
yeah, but we're talking about the back land as opposed to the unit that had tenants in it and, some cash flow associated with it.
Anyway.
But, we still have a $15 million housing component plus the $3 million in land before renovation costs for one-bedroom units. We're talking about $461,000. And then there's $150,000 per unit. So you're $610,000 per one-bedroom unit, which, is the same after construction cost that Tobias's plan penciled out to. And also the plan that the consultant, or it also happens to be the number that the consultants told us, if you can replace a 3-bedroom unit at $610,000 or less, that's the better plan. And the number for a 1-bedroom unit was significantly less than that.
Okay, we're not going to solve this afternoon. I appreciate the conversation, but we have plenty of time tomorrow to do this. Joe, thank you for your work. Peter, you had something you wanted to hand out to the committee, with a little preamble, I hope.
David, I will send you this electronically.
Yeah, I really did not
Okay. Yeah, no.
get it.
Well written, Joe.
Just as a preamble would be very brief, I, as one person, think that the town of Nantucket, as an employer, is doing exactly what it needs to do, we just approved $950,000 to upgrade one of the police facilities for its seasonal employees, and we're also putting money aside to do a study for other seasonal employees for the town of Nantucket. I think that's where community funds should stop. It's an employer. There's a lot of employers on this island. I think that us as a town spending on any of these two projects is not the right thing. I don't think you're getting a lot of bang for your dollar. You're talking, maybe 75 to 100 occupants on either properties. The town should not be in the business of managing, owning, maintaining, building housing for non-town and Nantucket employees. So I'm coming from a different thing. I've built a community of 150 homes with a sewer plant, with infrastructure, with water, with wells, with lights, with response. And a rule of thumb, and this is where Tobias's numbers are good on the upfront, but his operating costs are totally awash. And that's when you look at our operating budget, where I come from as an owner-operator. You should, on brand-new property that you build, put aside 0.08% each and every year of your total construction acquisition cost for the rainy day, for the reserves, for capital, not op, just capital. That in itself, that's brand-new construction. That in itself would be $150,000, and he's saying his operating costs are $158,000 a year. Well, that's just one line item.
Well, that's another place I think it's important to look at the differences between the two proposals, because the one proposal assumes that the town isn't going to pay anything after acquisition.
Yep.
And if that is available for Nantucket Inn, that same operator would presumably be available for Tobias's proposal.
Yeah, the only
Actually, they said they
involvement that I would
They've
approve.
tested that. They've gone out looking.
Who said that they were?
That was Tucker, that question was asked of Tucker last week.
Right.
And
but
they said, It's-
Is Tucker working on both proposals? Because it seems that he was working on one proposal.
he was asked the question about whether it fit in a private company's business model.
And
To do.
Housing Nantucket said that it was in their business
Yeah.
model. It is what they do with, I can't remember how many
But
other units.
they don't do that. Okay?
Housing
They
Nantucket
don't have the
doesn't do it.
people on the staff. The person who was doing it no longer works there.
So they don't maintain the units that they have now.
It's probably debatable. There's a legitimate question about whether we have a mature enough set of organizations to pull this housing off. Okay, that's a very legitimate and real discussion point that ought to be had with the town before the first dollar is spent. To that, I absolutely agree. And if it's housing Nantucket, terrific. But I don't think that the maturity level is,
My point is only if one set of assumptions is to be believed, then it's based on the fact that some operator's going to come from somewhere and maintain and operate 39 units, and on the other hand, we've got 25 units, but the assumption is that nobody's available who's interested in operating those things. That's a strange set of assumptions.
well, look, Halkeem will operate Nantucket Inn or a company like Halkeem. It's in their business model, they know how to do it. Halkeem, and I don't know how broadly Tucker reached out, but certainly Halkeem said, we would have to build a brand-new business model to do something along the lines of what Tobias was recommending. And that information, I think, has been conveyed to them, and that's why the question went out to Housing Nantucket. And I think the legitimate question, and you could ask it of Halkeem or any of the others, I assume that, I'm making the assumption they know what they're doing, given how many units they manage in that configuration where they're dense. But the question goes out to Housing Nantucket, are they, do they have the maturity in the organization and the capacity to do what would have to be done if you have dispersed housing around the island? And the immediate answer was that they don't even have the staff anymore to do what they're supposed to be doing. Now, that could be bad data on my part, so I don't, that's a direct question, but I didn't think there was a lot of confidence that the organization and that board could currently pull off what we're asking of them, or would potentially be asking of them. But, so, to me, let's just make sure if we're going to do this, and I think this becomes increasingly important as if we're embarking or thinking about embarking on this, that we have, the organizational capacity to pull the damn thing off. And I
I think it comes down to, at the end, for me, if I was still working at my day job, there was no way we'd write a check for $27 to $30 million without probably investing at least $100,000 into proper analysis. And so it's very difficult for me, as we sit here and talk about this, to be able to be in favor of investing this kind of money without understanding so many of the variables that are wide open, not the least of which is it being managed appropriately. So we allocate the funds, and then we find out that the town, no one has the capacity to really pull it off. So it's going to be high risk to begin with, and we don't have experienced management that can take it forward. So it makes me very nervous, both of these projects, for that reason, not because they're not potentially good ideas. It's just, it's really a leap of faith. So, done talking.
be fun tomorrow.
Motion to adjourn?
Cliff?
Oh, that's Cliff, I'm sorry, Cliff.
Thank you.